Alright, so I've got cleaner edges, and there's a couple of things I wanted to point out to you. We're going to zoom way in. You should zoom in when you're doing layer masking. To do it correctly, you have to zoom in. So, make sure that you get nice and close. And when I get in way close, we're talking I can see individual pixels. Now I'm going to hold down the space bar, and you'll see that allows me to have my move tool activated. So space bar down, I can inspect the edges of my document here. And one of the things you're going to notice is there's some bleed right here where blue is showing up on some of my individual pixels, and I can't remove all of that without removing the entire bar or the entire string. So one nice way of getting rid of that, and what I did up here on my strings here on the rope, you can see right here I've got a couple of areas I need to clean up, and then right in here as well. Select the thumbnail of your image, not the mask, your image in your hot air balloon layer. And then come over and select your sponge tool. Now your sponge tool may be hidden beneath either the dodge tool, which looks like a little lollipop almost, or the burn tool, which looks like a hand with an O. So select the sponge tool, go up to the top in the control panel, make sure you have Desaturate selected. Nice hard edged brush, set at about 2 pixels. That is really small. But watch what happens when I start going over these blue pixels with my sponge tool set to desaturate. Now this is an area that didn't have any color anyway. It's picking up the reflection from the sky. And so by going ahead and just removing that color, I can't just remove the strings or the rope or these black areas and white areas, but what I can do is I can remove the color cast from that blue sky that the hot air balloon was on. And so you can see where desaturating those pixels, pulling the color out, is starting to make that look a lot more believable and a lot more finished. Now some of these areas over here aren't even going to show once we reposition the balloon. But I wanted to demonstrate for you how you could easily go in when the line is so thin. What can you do? Well, you can pull the color cast off, and that's just what I'm doing here. Is I'm just removing the blue and leaving it white or black or gray. I'm removing all the color information with that saturation turned all the way down on the sponge tool. Alright, so zoomed way in, you just inspect the outside of your image. I'm much happier with that, especially after going over it with the sponge tool. Now I'm going to zoom back out, Command minus, zoom out. And you can see over here I have some areas that I still didn't do. It's not a problem. Again, you only needed to take care of the area right up until this part right here, because we're going to be hiding a lot of this here in a moment. Okay, zoom out to where you can see the entire image, much like this. Select both your hot air balloon layer and your levels 1 layer and hit Command T, because we are going to transform these layers. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit more because I want to be able to see this entire bounding box for the transform tool. Now notice when you come to the corners, you get this rounded edge transform tool. That means that you have the ability to rotate your image. Over here, same thing. The rounded double arrow means rotation. If I want to just pull straight out, I can do that by hovering over these little transform squares. But to rotate, all I have to do is hover over one of them on the outside of the bounding box and click and drag down or up, and it will rotate. Now we're wanting to rotate to where it looks pretty much like the balloon's floating straight up. And so rotate until you see something similar to that. Again, you need to have both the levels 1 layer and the hot air balloon layer selected. Now, all you have to do to move the image is click and drag it because we still have transform selected. And so go ahead and click and drag until you see a little bit of space in the sky below the basket. Bring the gentleman's hat to where it's touching the edge of the image right at the front. Okay, just a little bit of sky shown in between the front of his hat and the image. I'm going to hit enter. That's going to lock in place my transform. And now if I turn my levels adjustment layer off and my hot air balloon layer off, you can see there with the hot air balloon off, the levels adjustment layer. Turn the hot air balloon layer, and let's rename the levels to hot air levels and hit enter. And now you need to link those two layers together. So select the two of them, hot air levels and hot air balloon, and click the link button at the bottom of the layers panel. And now what happens is if I just select my hot air balloon layer, and let's say that I decide I want to move it, look above, you can see that layer mask moving in the hot air levels layer as well because they are linked together. I'm gonna go back and place it right where it was by clicking up 1 in my history panel. Okay, now if you would please select the cottage layer. Alright, so you can create a reveal all or hide all layer mask on your layer. With your layers selected, go ahead and select the cottage layer. You would go to the layer menu and come down to layer mask and select hide all, and you'll see where it creates a black filled layer mask. If you wanted a white filled layer mask, then you could do layer mask reveal all, which is the default. Now let's click in the layer mask and go up and select window and come down and select properties. In the layer mask properties panel opens. And let's take a look at this panel. This is my layer mask for the cottage layer, and we didn't mask anything out, so it's just filled with solid black. Now within this panel you can do a lot of different things. You can add or select the layer mask or a vector mask. You can adjust the density. If you've hidden an adjustment or effect with a mask and want to make the mask somewhat transparent, you can adjust that. And that's what this slider right here is for. So I'm going to now select the hot air levels layer mask. And we'll see that layer mask is over here on the left. You see the bounding box framing out the mask in the hot air levels layer. And so if I wanted to reduce the opacity of that mask, you see as we slide the density slider to the left, we're adjusting how dark, how black the mask is filled. Slide that all the way back, leave it at 100%. You can feather your mask, which softens the edges, makes it a little more believable, by sliding your slider into the right, and that refines the edge and softens it of your mask. Now, mask edge, when you click this button right here, you get the refine mask window. And so you can go in and you can adjust the edge of your mask, how much you would like to feather it, contrast, smoothing, all of those things through the refine mask window that opens when you click mask edge. Cancel. Color range opens the color range dialog box, and what this will do is it allows you to add or subtract from the mask based on the colors in your image. Alright, we're going to cancel out of that. If you were to click the invert button here, essentially it's going to apply the adjustment that we had. It's flipping the black and white is what it's doing. So what you had painted black is now going to be white. What was white will now be black, as you can see over here in the levels adjustment layer. I'm going to click invert again, and you see it switches back. So if you wanted to easily invert your mask, that's one very easy way of doing it. Again, if you want to load a selection from your mask, all you have to do is hold down the Command or Control key and click on the layer mask thumbnail. And then if you wanted to invert your selection to select the opposite area, all you would have to do is select inverse, and it would select the opposite area. Command D to deselect. Now if you want to apply the mask, that is a button down here that you can apply it to the layer. So there's a lot of things you can do with your properties panel. You can load a selection from the mask as well, just by clicking the little marching ant circle here, and that means that you don't have to use the Command, Control, and click. So with a single button you can do that as well. There are a lot of different things you can do with layer masking and a lot of options in this layers panel. Again, I strongly encourage you to read chapter 3 so that you can gain a better understanding of layers. Okay, I'm going to deselect, Command D. You have not changed anything on your image since you've adjusted and transformed the placement of the hot air balloon and hot air levels layers. I'm going to cancel out of the properties window, and we're going to save this. So we're going to go File, Save As, 3H, and your last name with cottage. Always remember to turn in a PSD. Click Save, and that concludes the layer masks portion of chapter 3.